Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM. Today we've returned to the Apedale Light Railway, the home of the Moseley Railway Trust, home of over 100 locomotives. And with so many locomotives around us, today they have chosen something genuinely very special and very important to railway heritage for us to take a closer look at. Whilst you've been watching Lawrie Goes Loco, have you ever thought, I really want to do what he gets to do? Well, I've got good news for you because the Foxfield Railway offer a driver experience course where you'll be welcomed up onto the footplate where you can sample one of these amazing engines close up and get a sense of the sheer power and magnificence that they present. It's a treat for all of the senses. Not only do you get to feel the power of the regulator, but you'll feel the heat emanating from the fire beneath you. And believe me, being on the footplate is one of the best experiences that this world has to offer. And it's not just the driving. You'll be shown how to swing a shovel and how to fire a steam locomotive, all under the watchful eye of our experienced volunteers who will tell you everything that you need to know and keep a watchful eye on you. And just think, this could be you driving a full-size steam locomotive. And that's not all. As part of your day, you'll be taken up into our signal box and shown how a railway works safely. Absolutely no experience is needed, so check out the link in the video description to book. And remember, for exclusive news, events, and early access to tickets, follow the link in the video description and sign up to the Foxfield Railway's newsletter. And remember, click the little box that says found by LMM to let them know you found it through me. And that will keep our wonderful relationship going well. And that means I can keep bringing you exclusive news, events and competitions working with the railway. That sounds pretty good really, doesn't it? Today we're looking at something quite special, which is this. This is Hudswell Clarke D558 of 1933-ish. I mean, more on that bit later. And this thing here is exceptionally important to industrial heritage. And I bet that the majority of you have absolutely no idea why this is important. This thing here is the first diesel narrow gauge locomotive built for the UK market. Yes, everything that we think when we think of narrow gauge, aside from things like Talclin and little steam engines, everything that comes to mind of industrial narrow gauge, motor rail simplexes, Ruston 48s, things like that. This is the granddaddy to them all. This marks the changing for Hudswell from moving away from steam engines to diesel. It's an important cornerstone in the company's history. This is so incredibly important to the tale of industry and heritage railways. And yet nobody knows about it. And I find that absolutely bonkers. We should all be coming to see this thing. This is a hugely important thing. And nobody knows. I can't get my head around that. And also, isn't it absolutely glorious? I think this is stunningly pretty, mostly because it has this giant great chimney on the top, steam engine style chimney. And the story behind this is that the manager of the works went, well, it's not a proper locomotive if it doesn't have a chimney. And thus, chimney. You look at that and go, well, that's definitely off a steam engine. And it just makes it, doesn't it? If you remove that, it would just be a box. But with it, it becomes something dignified, something more, something special. It's absolutely glorious. I love the little things like, I love the Hudswell written across the front. Not to mention the fact that finding Hudswell narrow gauge diesels is actually quite a challenge because they don't exist either. It's weirdly proportioned, isn't it? It has remarkably large driving wheels. They're 2 foot. That's almost the size of mine on my 48, which is a standard gauge engine. They're massive and they're very close together, but the chassis itself is rather long. It looks slightly weird. And then the cab is massive. I mean, this thing on the narrow gauge is just huge, but it's not very wide. It fits within your traditional 2 foot loading gauge. And it also looks quite powerful. It's a really weird confliction, isn't it? But it works. Sometimes something comes together and you go, nah, don't like that, that's just wrong. Whereas this has come together in such a way that it's beautiful. It's stunningly well built, isn't it? It looks mighty, bulky, powerful, strong, but also looks very antique, old, frail, which normally don't really mesh, but somehow this pulls it off. You look at it and goes, yeah, That's definitely an old loco, but it also just looks like a bruiser, doesn't it? The early history of this one is, well, something a little bit strange. You see, this thing was built in 1929, or at least construction started in 1929, and the original works plates were indeed made up to say 1929. And then stuff happened. It's possible that Hudswell thought that this locomotive was going to be completed earlier, and it dragged in production. For instance, the gearbox that's in it was a gearbox that was actually ordered for a sister locomotive, but ended up not being used in the sister locomotive, and ended up being used in this one instead. Plans recovered from Hudswell themselves say that there were discussions about the engine for this back in 1929. So clearly it was an ongoing project. The other big thing is we're not really sure who they were making this engine for. We're not sure if it was they thought that this is going to be wonderful and everyone's going to flock and want to buy it, and they were building it for prospective buyers, or indeed if they were building this as a demonstrator. That is lost to time. What we do know, though, is that it didn't go anywhere. In fact, it spent 3 more years at Hudswell Clarke. In 1933, the locomotive was sold, going to Beswick's Lime Works somewhere near Buxton. And they had already ordered some of these locomotives. In fact, the other surviving one of these, which is now on the Apedale Valley Light Railway, maybe not in working condition, had already gone to the railway and was working there. So they ordered another. In fact, the Locomotive magazine of 1933 states that they'd ordered a 4th 36 horsepower locomotive, which was this one. The irony, of course, was that this was the oldest locomotive. So the newest locomotive for the works was the oldest locomotive that Hudswell made. And it's presumably for this fact that the maker's plate on the side was changed, so it had already been 1929, remade to 1930, and now, as it was shipped off, it was rebranded as a brand new locomotive and had 1933 slapped on the side of it. Presumably, they just wanted it to be new and didn't want to be like, oh, we've got rid of this thing. The locomotive spent its entire working life at the Beswick Works, presumably just moving stuff around and banging wagons together. We believe, though, that its life there wasn't easy and wasn't without incident. We think that at some point, don't know when, it rolled. And yes, when I say rolled, I do mean dunk onto its side. The evidence for this is that the sandbox is here. This one is still nice and round, as Hudswell Clarke intended. The one on that side, however, that sandbox is, well, very angular and looks very much like a replacement. And of course, if the thing was to fall on its side, the sandbox would be the first thing to get smashed. And there was other evidence when the locomotive was restored. In 1957, it was re-engined. The original McLaren 3-cylinder engine was pulled out and replaced with a dormant 4-cylinder. Now, this was done on this one and its sister. This implies that it hadn't suffered a catastrophic failure, more likely that the original 3-cylinder McLarens were life expired, or maybe they just weren't fully up to the job. And so they replaced with these 4-cylinder dormant engines to what it carries to this day. What's interesting, though, is that the gearbox in this had been raised up, presumably to mate with the original McLaren engine. And so when the new engine came in, it was done in-house at Beswick's work, and this is characterised by the pretty shoddy machining work around it. There are bits cut out to accommodate the new engine. And as the gearbox was raised up slightly in the air, presumably the original McLaren engine just sat on the chassis rails. The new engine had to be raised up to meet the gearbox rather than muck around with the gearbox height. No, we'll just raise the engine up. And so there are plenty of shims and little bits of metal just to raise the height of the engine up so that it would mate successfully. It's really a bit of a bodge. All good things, however, must come to an end, and Beswick's eventually decided that they'd had enough of the locomotive, and by 1971 it was languishing in a scrapyard. And thankfully, though, you might be able to guess, it was indeed saved from scrap by the fact it sat there behind me. And initially it moved to the Apedale Light Railway, yes, the famous little railway, which must have been quite a sight to have this gigantic thing trundling around. It doesn't really add up in my head of how Capey was to then have this there, but there it was. In 2006, it came here to the Apedale Railway. And the original owner of it, who had saved it from scrap, had kept it in a very original condition. He didn't want to change the bodywork or anything, he wanted to keep it how it was. Which meant that when it came here, having been stored outside and having been scrapped, the bodywork was in a terrible state. When the owner passed away, the locomotive was donated to the Moseley Railway Trust, and the decision was made to do a restoration on it. It had several problems. There were gearbox niggles, and also it required 3 people to hand start the lump in there. And so a well overdue restoration was started, and this involved fixing the gearbox problem, putting an electric start on it, and redoing the bodywork. In honour of the late owner though, the cab has been kept original, and so on this side and the other side it's still pitted and worn, because they wanted to try and preserve what he wanted to preserve, the locomotive as it was, whereas this behind me is all new to actually work as a body shell. And since then it's been used here at the railway. It's safe, and it's one of their most iconic locomotives, I suppose. As we kind of mentioned the engine, I suppose let's open up the sides and have a peer at this massive great lump that's inside it. Right, in here we have quite the little lump. So this has a weird way of collecting it on with clips like that. And presenting the Dorman 4LB, a 6.3 litre lump. And now originally these were 80 horse, but this one has been derated down to 60. We believe that was done when it was installed, because 80 horsepower in this would have been, well, pretty mad really. And it is huge, isn't it? It's rare to actually open up an engine bay on a locomotive and have something that takes up the entirety of the space. I mean, often we open up and there's a little engine there and lots of air room around it. No, this is just colossally massive, isn't it? It's magnificently big. And you look at that and go, oh yeah, that's a big lump. Whilst we're in here as well, you can also see where it's been flame cut out around here to make the space for it. And also a good example of the shims here, where the whole unit was raised up so that it would mate up with the gearbox in there. I don't know what it is about this, but it's such a lump, isn't it? You look at it and go, oh yeah, that's not only going to make a good noise, it's also going to shift nicely. It's just proper, isn't it? I mean, these are proper locomotive. No mucking around with little 20 horsepower lumps with this. No. This is proper. So, with that looked at, I suppose the next thing to do is to climb up into the cab and have a look in there. Welcome to the cab of D558, and yes, it's a little bit cramped in here. As cabs go, it's actually one of the, I'm not going to say poorly laid out, but in terms of room to move in here and the space given to me, it's pretty badly done. The big problem in here for terms of actually moving is sat in front of me here is the diesel fuel tank, which is fine because it means that we've got a very pretty bonnet. It's not taking up space there and it all looks quite nice and locomotively, but it's just in the way. Second, we have the handbrake here, and this is a very good handbrake, apart from it means it's totally impossible for me to access that door there because the handbrake's in the way and I physically cannot squeeze through the gap. So that's a challenge. We also have these here, which are the sanders, which are very useful to have them inside the cab as well. And of course the most notable feature is the fact that we have this vintage fire extinguisher in the cab. I'm actually sat right on top of the gearbox, and in front of me I have 2 pedals, both lovingly written with Hudswell on them. This one here is the clutch, as you would with any geared locomotive. Then next door to it is a brake. And no, it's not a brake on the wheels. No, this is a band brake that goes on the drive itself. And then things get a little bit more interesting, because if I look down, not only do I have the exposed mechanism down here of everything, which moves when I press things, I've also can see the clutch disengaging and re-engaging, and have a totally exposed coupling between the clutch and the gearbox itself. So I do that, and I watch the clutch move back and forth. So when this is in under power, that's all spinning around as a spinning ball of death. I can also see straight down, so I can see my wheels, and if I move around a bit I can also see down there, I can see my chain drive. So with a bit of a wiggle I can see if we're slipping or not, which is a very useful feature to have. In front of me here I have my throttle, which is notched, and apparently it's very, very sensitive. And on top there is what looks like it was once a linkage, so presumably that was the control originally for the McLaren, and it's now been changed to work with the Dorman. In front of that here I have an oil pressure gauge, and that is all I have to tell me how anything is doing on this. No water temperature, no nothing else, just oil pressure sat there. And then below that there is a pull stop. And down here is the key for starting the new electric start. And then of course the most important thing is I have a gearbox, which is pulled this way towards me for
forward and low, push that way for forward and high. High speed on this apparently is quite fast. Now, to the point that I don't really know how fast it is, but I've been told that first gear will be more than enough. Then sliding it over here to this side of the box is reverse, and the same this way for low, that way for high. And of course the drive comes off this and goes to the rear axle, and then is transferred again to the front axle. So drive goes to rear axle, and then another sprocket on the rear axle transfers that drive to the front axle, meaning that both axles are driven by this little thing. Sat up here, I do feel quite high up, and I think this is great. And just being in it makes me go, I really want to take it out. So let's find out what prep I need to do on this, which is basically the first thing they did after steam engine. So I'm assuming the prep's going to be pretty steam engine related, and get it fired up and take it out for a drive. Which means we might as well start in the cab. Starting off with down here, we have the gearbox oil dipstick. And that is full of the golden sticky stuff, so that's good. Important, keep your gearboxes lubricated. Next, we move across to here and spin this off, which is our diesel tank. I'll have a gander in there. Yep, that has got diesel inside it as well, so that's very fine. You can also do the wonderful tap test of sounds empty, sounds more full towards there. And then, in a very awkward place, there are these two things down here which I need to give a twist here and a twist here, which grease up the clutch, and that concludes what I need to do up here. So now I can hop off where the sides have magically been opened and do the remainder of the prep. And then of course we have, yep, it has still got the hand start fitted, so I'm going to have to use the hand start, aren't I? Having climbed down from the cab on the other side because the handbrake's in the way here and I can't, we walk alongside it, and I realise there's one thing about this. I really wish it had side rods, because then it would look like its big sister, Mary, which you may have seen in the Middleton Railway, which worked at the same place that this did. Side rods would complete the whole look, and I keep kind of looking at it. And when I first saw it, when it was parked in one of the sidings and I didn't see the side, I thought it would have side rods. It's just kind of what I expected, and was almost a little disappointed when it didn't. Anyway, coming round here, because we're going to do it on the handle, we have a decompressor up here, so we push that all the way into the up position like that. Then I can come round to the front. Now, you may notice here that the knuckle at the front, the bumper, buffer, whatever you want to call it, has got two distinct shapes. This one at the bottom is the original, and the top one has been replaced with a new one. You can see the difference in nice, shiny, sharp edges of metal and less sharp below. In front of me is my hand start lever where it's going to go into the socket. So I come up here and just flick the wing nut up here, and I can open in here and check if the radiator has water, which it does, and put that back and do that back up. And then hop down and walk back around here to the engine itself, where we have our oil dipstick here. So we pull that out and see if we've got the black stuff on it. And wow, that's very clean. That's not even black and nasty, that's clean. I didn't think it had anything on it, but it's clean oil. That's amazing. Amazing for a diesel. And in here there is a little engine counter, which shows how little this has done since it was rebuilt. Which means that's all the basic prep to do. The axle boxes have little fillers here, but they're done periodically, we don't need to do that. And there are a couple of oil points on the mechanism there, but they've been done for me, so I don't need to. Just there and there, but don't need to bother. So all I need to do is to gather the big heavy thing here and wander around to the front, and then we find out where it's going to go, like that. And there we go. Feel it engage. Whoa. Wow. God. And we turn it over once. And now we can engage the cold start, which is this button here. And with that, they say you need 3 people. Well, I'm going to hope to have one person to throw the decompressor for me. We hope that it will go. Here we go. Oh my dear. Go for it. Come on. That was quite good. That That was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. That took 3 men normally, and we did it with 2. So with that, let's take it out for a run. So here we go. We put the clutch in, which stops the spinning ball of death down there. Slide it across into first, and then slowly release that, which once again alarmingly starts the spinning ball of death down there. My train all takes its slack, and away we go. Yes, handbrake off and gently pulling forward. So immediately, this is a lot more refined than I thought it was going to be. I thought that this was going to be a lot more clunky, bangy, and just bad and feel old, whereas it feels amazingly tidy and well put together. It feels a remarkably precision machine. And the throttle here, just a simple notch of that, makes quite a large difference to the engine. And the way it takes up power is silky smooth. There is then a moment as it gets up to speed, the vacuum governor cuts in, we all kind of sway that way again, and then we carry on at a relatively steady pace. Acceleration is not a smooth thing with this, but the sense of power is amazing. And again, what a massive honour it is to drive this, the first narrow gauge diesel made for the UK market. I mean, this is a real piece of heritage here, a real piece of the story of industrial railways, of narrow gauge railways, and I'm sat here trundling along driving on it. Well, I bet that, as I told you earlier in the video, none of you knew this. It's an amazing thing. I love it. I love being up here, and that sense of power is absolutely. It's walking away with these skips behind me like they are absolutely nothing. It's absolutely magnificently wonderful. It makes such an amazing noise as you open it up. It's a very intoxicating rumble, and it just walks away with this like it is absolutely nothing. It has made no difference putting that train behind it to the noise it makes. I kid you not. It makes the same intoxicating rumble of noise just when you set off on its own. It doesn't even notice the train is there. It's magnificent. Some problems. It has been designed for someone significantly smaller than myself. To depress the clutch, I really do need to bend myself. I'm just not made for this. I am too long. I'd like some adjustment on the seat or the pedal somewhere so I can operate it. And I really don't like the brake. I find the brake to be basically completely inefficient at doing anything. Yes, if I was at higher revs and I drop it out of revs, yes, it is better at that point. But I'll just use the handbrake. I don't really know why that's there when you've got a perfectly good handbrake. That doesn't seem to do anything for me. It's just that. the handbrake's fine. Getting in and out of it too is a bit tight, and it's a bit of a paraphernalia getting in and out. But I can work with that. However, the thing I like best is looking forward and the view. It's a narrow bonnet, so I can see down to the front. I can see down to the front Santas on my side. I can't see on the other side. So I've got a vague idea for buffering up, but I love that chimney. The chimney in it makes it feel so amazingly vintage and glorious, and driving it, you really do know that it's something special. What's also quite interesting is it comes quite high up. Quite a few narrow gauge locomotives you don't really step up into, you kind of step on, or you sit into, whereas this is a climb up and into the cab, and I feel huge. This thing feels massive. I think that's the biggest thing for me. It feels like a huge locomotive. It feels like a proper locomotive. Something that they kind of feels like they designed for the main line and then shrunk down for a bit, because we're trundling along at a fine pace at not much open on the throttle, and I have opened this up to almost the whole way in first gear, and it is plenty fast enough for the narrow gauge. Put it in second gauge. I suspect that this is a standard gauge gearbox they put in this, because it is ludicrously fast to be on the narrow gauge. Scarily fast. So fast, in fact, that nobody here has dared to take it to full speed to find out just what it will do. It's just that fast. It's a ludicrously weird setup. And again, considering this is the Big Daddy, the one that started it all, it's amazingly well defined, it's amazingly well thought out, it's just a nice thing to drive. That is a relatively easy thing to drive. You have to think ahead a little bit. You want to start throttling down and then gently use the clutch rather than just slamming it shut. But it's just good. It's really good. I wasn't expecting it to be this good. Absolutely love it, and of course, more than anything, it's such a good noise. It's such a monumentally good noise. It's the overarching theme of this thing is just how good the noise is, and that intoxicating sense of power. It's a wonderfully good little narrow gauge engine, and I mean, I think everything here, I think all 400 items of rolling stock at the Apedale Railway could be hauled behind this and it would just trundle off quite happily. I mean, this is over-engineering at its best. Yes, I know it's got a much bigger and higher rated engine than it used to, and yes, it was never meant to be this powerful, but this, guys, it is over-engineered and overpowered for what it was designed to do and for anything it needs to do here. But because of that, it makes it absolutely wonderful. Otherwise, this seat is not very comfortable either, and I am kind of forced into this position. And I'm sure that if I was to operate this for an entire day, my backside would have gone numb. But the track here at the Apedale Railway is rather superb, and this little behemoth lies over it remarkably nicely. I guess because I'm so high up and the wheelbase is so short and I'm on the overhang, that I feel as we kind of go up and down, but I don't really feel any bumps or crashes. The ride is far better than I ever thought it would be. I just think this is great. It's genuinely one of my favourite things I've ever driven on the narrow gauge. I just think it's an absolutely magnificent piece of kit. I'm so happy that this has been kept and kept in a working condition. What a brilliant thing. It's superb. It's absolutely superb. So guys, that brings us to the end of this video looking at this absolutely, well, pioneering for Hudswell Clarke locomotive. I have loved it. I think it's wonderful. I think the way it looks is wonderful. And you know what? For something that's, well, approaching being 100 years old, 91 years old, it's fantastic. I know it's had a heavy rebuild, but the guys here at the Apedale Railway have done a magnificent job, and it drives so much better than I thought it was going to. I was expecting something old and clunky, and this is a wonderful machine. It's so nice to drive. A bit loud, but for control purposes, it's just lovely, and I have loved it and really look forward to coming back here and having another go. So a massive great thank you to both the Apedale Light Railway and the Moseley Railway Trust for inviting me back to have a go with this engine. If you want more information on the railway when it's open, or the trust themselves and the amount of engines they have in their collection, because it is over 100 locomotives, then the links to them are in the video description. And if maybe you want to get involved and learn how to drive this or one of the other 100 locomotives here, the Apedale Railway would love to hear from you. They're a small society and they would love to have more people getting involved. If you fancy just helping out a railway and you don't want to be an active volunteer, but you'd like to be a member and keep up to date with what they're doing and help support some of the projects like restoring this, then also the links are in the video description for you to have a look, get involved and just help support this amazing collection. So I've also signed up. I'm a member here now, so if you come along volunteer, maybe we'll hang out and be on a loco together. And with that, thanks for watching guys. We'll see you next time. And of course, if you have enjoyed this video, how about clicking over there somewhere for another video we've done here at the Apedale Light Railway? Or if narrow gauge isn't your thing, how about clicking down there for one of our standard gauge reviews? Thanks for watching guys.